So if we go back to 2016, Chinese journalists and political analysts were just kind of scrambling.
Oh, totally scrambled.
Yeah, I mean, they were watching a Western political figure basically torch the unwritten, universally accepted rules of global diplomacy on live television. And, well, their standard political dictionaries just didn't have a word for it.
Right, they were just throwing adjectives at the wall.
Exactly, like translating concepts like maverick, erratic, or subverter, just trying to capture the sheer energy of what they were witnessing. But eventually, this massive billion-person media ecosystem, so mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, the overseas diaspora, they all settled on one hyper-specific, really evocative term to describe Donald Trump's governance style.
And it's a fascinating term, too.
It really is. So we're looking at a huge stack of sources today to uncover how this one phrase kind of encapsulates this deep foundational shift from polished traditional diplomacy to just raw transactional geopolitics. And this deep dive is tailored specifically for you, the Chinese language learner, to give you a front row seat to global perspectives on 21st century political realignments.
But before we really dig into the mechanics of these sources, we do need to set a firm boundary for you, the listener.
Yeah, good point.
Because the material we're unpacking today deals with inherently and, frankly, intensely politically charged content. So we are not taking sides. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints, left-wing, right-wing, or anything in between. Our mission today is strictly to report impartially on the linguistic observations and, the geopolitical analysis contained in these specific Chinese language texts.
Right, we're just dissecting how these analysts interpret this era of disruption. So to understand this massive geopolitical shift that redefined the last decade, we first have to look at the specific language the media uses to define the personality driving that shift.
Because when someone steps onto the world stage and completely defies the traditional playbook, the initial reporting is usually just, well, a mix of confusion and fascination.
Yeah, and the sources highlight that Chinese media initially reached for terms like EO, which translates roughly to the subverter or the overturner.
Right, or they used EU, meaning like maverick or unconventional.
But those felt a bit, inadequate over time.
Yeah, they really did. Those early descriptors focused primarily on just surface-level behavior. Like they describe someone who is simply different, someone who, refuses to wear the traditional diplomatic uniform.
Right.
But as the geopolitical impact deepened over the years, analysts realized that terms implying mere nonconformity were just completely inadequate. The media commentary eventually converged on an ultimate consensus term that goes way deeper than just being a maverick, and that term is aka.
Pòjú. Man, let's unpack the weight of those characters for our language learners, because it is so much more visceral than the English translations of like the rule breaker or the disruptor or the game changer.
Oh, absolutely.
Because pol means to violently break, smash, or destroy. And Ju is this fantastic character, refers to the situation, the layout, the established game, or, the complex web of relationships on a board.
Yeah, the board itself.
Right. And Shi is just the person doing the action. So are we basically talking about a chess player who, instead of trying to outsmart an opponent with a clever new opening strategy, just reaches out and flips
the entire chessboard over, yes.
Wow.
That is the perfect way to visualize the concept of a Pòjú. I mean, it is the absolute injection of the premise of the game itself. A maverick might, move their knight in an unconventional pattern, but they are still playing chess.
Right.
A Pòjú shatters the political stalemates by upending the established norms entirely. The pieces are literally on the floor, the traditional players are utterly bewildered, and the Pòjú forces a complete realignment of the playing field by demanding everyone play by a completely new and honestly, often terrifyingly unpredictable set of rules.
That is a brilliant distinction. They flip the board, and suddenly decades of carefully crafted Ivy League diplomatic strategies are just useless.
Completely useless.
Everyone is scrambling, trying to figure out how to respond to a leader who doesn't even acknowledge the old rules exist. But flipping a board is, it's a single action or maybe a personality trait. How does that translate into a sustained political philosophy?
Well, the sources suggest this board-flipping approach systematically stripped away the highly polished veneer of elite establishment politics.
Okay, so stripping that away.
Right. And to grasp the magnitude of that stripping away, we have to look at what it actually replaced. For decades following the Second World War, the Western geopolitical standard was built on strict adherence to political correctness, deliberate ambiguity, and, diplomatic euphemisms.
That's very careful language.
Exactly. Traditional diplomats prized stability above all else. You never publicly humiliated an ally, you always spoke about shared democratic values, and you buried major disagreements in these deeply boring, thousand-page trade communiques.
It seems to me like traditional diplomacy operated a lot like a long-term marriage.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right, like it was built on shared vows, long-term ideological purity, and this mutual understanding that you were just in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Even when things get incredibly rocky behind closed doors, you present a united, stable front to the world because the institution itself is sacred.
Right, right.
But this new Pòjú approach, this merchant style thinking to the sources describe it, feels much more like a cutthroat real estate contract.
Yes, exactly.
It's driven purely by daily wins, immediate leverage, and the constant aggressive question of, what have you done for me lately?
That distinction between a marriage and a commercial contract is exactly how Chinese analysts frame the shift. A marriage values long-term ideological alignment, which, can often mean compromising your own immediate needs for the sake of the partnership.
Sure.
But a real estate contract values only the immediate bottom line. The sources spent a lot of time analyzing how this transactional, populist, businessman persona resonated so deeply with working-class voters.
Don't you say?
Yeah, because those voters felt utterly abandoned by the traditional marriage-style system. From their perspective, the elite diplomatic establishment was so busy maintaining polite global relationships and protecting the post-Cold War consensus that they just allowed domestic manufacturing and working-class prosperity to completely hollow out.
And to capture the raw energy of that real estate contract diplomacy, the Chinese media uses a fascinating phrase, ho, which is jixianxia, or extreme pressure.
Extreme pressure, yeah.
It's often explicitly linked in these texts to the concept of the art of the deal. It basically sounds like the application of maximum unbearable leverage to force a counterparty into a favorable transaction, totally regardless of the historical relationship.
And the underlying mechanic of Jixiamxia is fascinating because it completely abandons the concept of mutual benefit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, in traditional diplomacy, negotiations aim for a win-win scenario so both leaders can save face domestically, right?
Right. Nobody wants to look like a loser.
Exactly. But extreme pressure operates on a zero-sum logic. It is the absolute willingness to walk away from the table or inflict severe economic pain until the other side caves.
Wait, but if you treat international relations like a series of zero-sum cutthroat real estate deals, doesn't that just make you wildly volatile on the world stage?
Well,
I mean, if every single relationship is only as good as the immediate financial win or loss, you lose all the predictability that keeps the world from, descending into chaos.
it's so funny you say that because the sources address that exact fear. But they frame the volatility not as a dangerous side effect, but as the core strategy itself.
Wait, really, the volatility is the strategy?
Yes. In traditional diplomacy, predictability is your greatest asset because it builds trust and deters miscalculation. But in transactional diplomacy, unpredictability is weaponized. It becomes your greatest source of negotiating power.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If your geopolitical opponent or even your ally has absolutely no idea what you are going to do next, if they think you might actually be crazy enough to blow up the entire global economy over a trade dispute, they cannot adequately prepare.
That is wild.
Right. That merchant-style volatility keeps the entire globe constantly off balance, which mathematically maximizes the Pòjú's leverage.
Okay, so we have this disruptor who uses extreme pressure and weaponized volatility to basically force real estate-style contracts on the global stage.
Yeah.
How did this actually play out in practice? Because the sources detail how this commercial logic systematically dismantled the post-Cold War bipartisan consensus. And they point to three very specific arenas of geopolitical disruption.
Right.
Let's look at the first one, the dismantling of multilateralism.
And the Chinese internet slang adopted by the media to describe this phenomenon is just brilliant, and its casualness. It's or tuikun.
Tuikun.
Yeah, it literally translates to exiting the groups.
I love the imagery of that so much. It's the exact phrase you use when you get annoyed with a noisy family WeChat group. You just hit the leave group button.
Yes, exactly.
Except in this geopolitical context, the group chats are monumental international agreements, like the Paris Climate Accord, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Iran nuclear deal. The sheer casualness of exiting the group, applied to decades of multilateral negotiations, is just staggering.
The casualness reflects the transactional mindset perfectly, though. In the traditional diplomatic view, broad, multilateral frameworks were the crowning achievements of global cooperation.
Right, they were the architecture of peace.
Exactly. But through the lens of a Pòjú, these agreements were viewed as terrible business deals that acted as shackles on American economic sovereignty. They restricted movement and offered a terrible return on investment for the average citizen.
But logically, if you withdraw from treaties like the TPP, you remove the shackles, sure. But it doesn't actually compel other nations to give you what you want, does it?
Well,
I mean, it just takes you off the playing field. Does Tuikon mean the disruptor just wanted to pack up, isolate America from the rest of the world, and build a fortress?
the analysis in the text makes a crucial distinction there. Exiting the groups was not about true isolationism. The goal wasn't to stop trading or interacting with the world.
Oh, okay.
It was a sharp, calculated pivot away from multilateralism toward unilateral and bilateral negotiations. It's basically basic commercial leverage.
Ah, I see. Because if you negotiate with 20 countries at once, your power is diluted. The smaller countries form a bloc and outvote you.
Precisely. The United States is the largest economy in the world. By shattering the multilateral groups, the Pòjú forces every country to negotiate one-on-one.
And in a one-on-one cage match.
Exactly. The larger economy has overwhelming absolute leverage. The sources note that this move fast and break things approach, forcing bilateral compliance, is far more akin to a hostile corporate takeover than anything resembling traditional statesmanship.
Which flows perfectly into this second major disruption detailed in our sources, the weaponization of tariffs.
Yes, this was huge.
For my entire life, tariffs were basically boring textbook economics. They were used surgically, usually to protect a very specific vulnerable domestic industry like steel or agriculture. But this new transactional logic elevated tariffs to the premier geopolitical weapon.
They shifted from a defensive shield to an offensive club used as a weapon of first resort. And the true shockwave to the global system, the thing that proved the old rules were dead, was that this trade war wasn't just targeted at obvious geopolitical rivals like China. This extreme economic pressure was imposed indiscriminately on traditional, long-standing allies.
Yeah, like Europe, Japan, South Korea. I mean, countries that had hosted American military bases for decades were suddenly being treated like hostile corporate competitors.
Imposing heavy tariffs on traditional allies signaled a massive, terrifying paradigm shift for the diplomatic establishment. It proved that the ideological discount was just gone.
The ideological discount.
Yeah, for decades, allies assumed that because they shared democratic values and voted together at the UN, they would enjoy preferential economic treatment. The Pòjú stripped that away, essentially saying shared values don't pay the bills.
Wow. It's the ultimate manifestation of America First. The Chinese analysts summarize this as the hallmark of a new era of deglobalization. It was a stark message that historical friendships offered zero protection against commercial logic. Every single bilateral relationship had to justify its existence on a daily balance sheet.
And if applying commercial logic to allied trade caused a shockwave, the third example from our sources absolutely paralyzed the traditional diplomatic world.
Oh, the monetization of national security.
Yes. We are talking about the complete commercialization of military alliances, most notably questioning the foundational value of NATO.
I mean, for over half a century, NATO was the sacred pillar of the post-Cold War order. The concept of Article 5, that an armed attack on one member is an attack on all members, was the absolute ideological and security bedrock of the Western world.
Right. It was the nuclear umbrella.
But a rule breaker looks at that sacred pillar and just sees an unpaid invoice.
It fundamentally changes the definition of an ally from a partner to a subscriber.
Hmm.
A Pòjú looks at the military ledger and demands that allies pay their fair share, usually defined as a specific percentage of their GDP in exchange for continued protection. It essentially commercialized the nuclear umbrella.
The existential panic that must have caused is wild to think about.
Oh, yeah.
If you are a traditional diplomat, deterrence relies on the absolute, unwavering certainty that the alliance will hold. If deterrence suddenly becomes conditional on a financial audit, if an adversary thinks the U.S. might not defend a NATO ally because that ally's defense spending was only 1.8% instead of 2%, the entire architecture of global security starts to crumble.
The Chinese analysis highlights exactly that vulnerability. By treating national security like a protection racket or a homeowners association fee, where failing to pay your dues means the guard won't protect your house, the Pòjú upended the very concept of ideological loyalty.
Yeah.
It was no longer about the shared values of the free world defending against authoritarianism. It was purely about whether the financial transaction had cleared.
So after dissecting all these specific board-flipping policy actions, from casually exiting monumental climate accords, to bashing traditional allies with tariffs, to putting a literal price tag on the NATO nuclear umbrella. How does the Chinese language media ultimately summarize the legacy of this corporate waiter approach to global leadership?
This is where we see the profound cultural depth of the term "loya." The sources detail how the term carries a deeply embedded dual meaning in the narrative fabric of Chinese language media.
Like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. It operates as a massive double-edged sword, capturing both awe and terror simultaneously.
I can easily see the terror for the diplomatic establishment, but tell me about the awe. Where does the positive edge of that sword come in?
Well, on one hand, the term objectively praises the immense, almost superhuman disruptive power required to execute this shift. It recognizes a remarkably strong will and a unique ability to shatter bureaucratic stagnation.
Okay, that makes sense.
There is a deep acknowledgement in the analysis that sometimes political systems become so calcified, so gridlocked, and so beholden to elite interests that only a massive blunt force object can break them open. To supporters and populists, this figure is a necessary hero dismantling a corrupt, self-serving global bureaucracy that forgot about the common worker.
But the other edge of the sword is the fallout of that destruction.
Exactly right. When you tear down the old order, you don't magically arrive at a utopia. You are left with global instability, immense friction, and profound, terrifying uncertainty.
Yeah.
To detractors, this figure isn't a hero. They are the reckless destroyer of the international stability that allowed global prosperity to flourish in the first place.
The sources use a fantastic analogy to sum up this duality.
Yeah.
They compare the Pòjú to a bull in a china shop. And I think what's so brilliant about that image is that it perfectly encapsulates the polarized global reaction.
How so?
Think about it. If you are a working-class voter who hates the china shop, if you think it's overpriced, elitist, and a place you've been historically excluded from, you're standing outside the window, cheering for the bull. You want to see the delicate plates smash because they never belonged to you anyway.
That's a great point. But if you are a traditional diplomat, an international business leader, or someone who relies on the complex, delicate rules of that shop for your safety and livelihood, you are inside the shop, mourning the broken china, and terrified of where the bull is going to charge next.
Because regardless of whether you are outside cheering for the bull or inside mourning the broken plates, the fundamental reality is identical. The shot has been permanently, irrevocably altered.
Yeah, you can't just glue the plates back together and pretend the bull was never there.
Right. The sources conclude that regardless of whether history assigns praise or blame, this transactional extreme pressure approach undeniably became the ultimate variable that completely redefined the political landscape of the 21st century.
The old rules are gone, and every nation on Earth is now forced to adapt to a reality where commercial leverage often supersedes ideological loyalty.
And that profound shift brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We set out to combine a rigorous geopolitical analysis with a linguistic masterclass, and I think we've seen just how incredibly powerful specific language can be.
Absolutely.
Learning terms like Pòjú, so the rule breaker, jixianxia, or extreme pressure, and tui quan, exiting the groups, isn't just about passing a Chinese vocabulary test or sounding smart at a dinner party.
No, not at all. It provides a profound window into how an entire hemisphere of media and analysis understands the mechanics of global power dynamics. It maps the exact psychology behind the transition from polite consensus to bare-knuckle geopolitical leverage.
Right, and mastering this vocabulary gives you, the learner, a critical tool. It allows you to step outside your own cultural echo chamber and get a front-row seat to how the rest of the world perceives the dismantling of traditional diplomacy and the rise of raw transactional geopolitics. It gives you a wider, sharper lens to view the news.
Because knowledge is most valuable when you can apply it to decode the bigger picture. In a world of constant information overload, understanding the nuanced ways different cultures define and analyze disruption is essential for truly grasping the reality of modern international relations.
So as you go about the rest of your day, we want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder on your own. It builds on everything we've unpacked today about flipping chessboards and upending systems, but it takes the concept one step further into the future.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a rule breaker, a true Pòjú, is completely successful in tearing down the old diplomatic order and forcing the entire globe to play by their new cutthroat transactional rules, at what point do their revolutionary new rules just calcify and become the new establishment?
Ooh, that's a good question.
And when they do, How long will the world have to wait before the next disruptor comes along to shatter them?